we ultimately moved to is we first moved to becoming a predictive engine, right? So what does this likely mean for the future of your project, right? So if you're behind schedule by this much, when are you likely to finish? If something has deviated from where it was supposed to be, what is the likely impact on construction? And then to move from predictive to prescriptive.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I'm joined by my guest, Raffi Holzer, who's based in New York City, just north of it. He's the CEO at Avvir. Good to have you on, man.
Yeah, good to be here.
Now, Avvir is a platform, as you describe it, focused on a system of records for construction. So we're really talking about enterprise-focused company here in the construction technology area, or pulling from your website also, it said using automated verification analytics. Lots of fancy words, but help me understand then, what's the problem that you see in the marketplace your customers are facing right now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so every industry, every business should want to have a system of record for the data that matters, right? So if you are a salesperson, your Bible is the CRM, right? Your customer relationship management system. What has gone on? Where did I leave that customer? How many emails have I sent them? When's their birthday? All of that information matters to you for obvious reasons. It's the same in construction. There's a lot of data that you care about. Right. So where are we with respect to the schedule? Are we actually building to spec or not? How much does stuff cost? How much have we paid for? How much do we owe to whom and when? All of that stuff matters, but there is no system, as my contention at least, is that there is no true system of record today in the industry. And the reason I say that is there are two things missing from any of kind of the data sets that are out there. The first is that there's no unifying data structure to bring together, just for example, those three data sets that I mentioned, your costs, your schedule, your plans, into one cohesive whole, never mind all the other potential data sets that you might care about. And the other is that construction projects, especially at the enterprise level, move at such a fast pace and are so complex. There's no way to actually keep those records up to date given the pace of change. And so you might have plans, but you don't have a system of record.
So it's like you have information already. This information exists somewhere, but probably isolated, and it's not necessarily up to date. That's really the issue that you're seeing.
Yeah. And so actually another way of framing this problem, this is like an amazing stat that I think the FMI group put out. I think it was about 95 or 96% of all data generated on construction sites goes unused, right? So it's not that the data doesn't exist, but the problem is that it's unstructured, right? So if you think of a photograph being taken on a construction site, that's a piece of data, or that's actually, there's lots of data contained in there, but it's not necessarily usable because you'd have to take thousands of photographs to capture the construction site, and who has the time to sift through thousands of photographs to determine what they mean and act on it?
This challenge that you're solving right now wasn't the original challenge you set out to solve when you start looking at the construction arena, right?
No, it's kind of taken a set of twists and turns, not too dissimilar from my own path to getting here.
So take me back then. Like, help me understand. Like, where did you start that got you into this whole journey of construction tech?
So I was a physics undergrad with the idea that I was going to eventually get into neural engineering, which at the time was very niche, and most people didn't know what you meant when you said it. Today, a lot of people are aware of one of Elon Musk's many ventures, Kernel. Which is his exciting endeavor to, Neuralink. Kernel is a competitor.
Same space, yeah. Neuralink, to be able to control a computer with your mind.
Exactly. So brain-computer interfaces is the scientific domain that they all fall under. And that's what I was really passionate about, and I was going to pursue a PhD in that space. And actually, I got into a PhD program. Before I started the PhD program, I did an internship, though, at a lab at Carnegie Mellon University in a robotics lab there. And the robotics lab happened to be focused on automation in construction. So that was actually my first exposure to construction and the problems therein. And the problem that I discovered there was actually just that building plans did not accurately reflect the buildings they were supposed to. I had been interested for a while in the notion of digital twins as they applied to real estate and facility management. And I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. So that summer, this was back in the summer of 2011, when I was doing the internship, I asked property managers and building managers and building owners that I got to meet over the course of this experience about this concept, what they thought of it. Was it a good idea, something they'd be interested in? What I later came to call customer discovery. And the feedback that I got was completely uniform, which was, we've tried this already. It hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked because the software that has tried to do this assumed that we had accurate plans about our buildings, and we don't, which I thought was insane. It implied two things. It implied that, first of all, construction doesn't go according to plan, and B, nobody takes the time to update the plans to reflect the actual conditions, which was astonishing. And so my idea about construction, the business idea that I had, is maybe we could solve that problem, right? We could just automatically update the plans. So, because apparently the reason it wasn't getting done was it was expensive and difficult and tedious. So what if we could automate that? That would be really valuable. So fast forward, I'm in my PhD program. Turns out I keep on getting involved in the entrepreneurial competitions they have. I was at Penn for grad school, so they've got the Wharton Business Plan competition. I entered that. I enter another. I'm much more involved in the business plan competitions than I am in school.
You just like PhD, you're like, nah, the business idea.
Yes, exactly. So I had an advisor, actually. He set me down. He's like, you don't want to do this. You don't want to spend the next, I was 12 months in at that point. He's like, take the master's and go. It was hard to hear at the time because I was dead set on becoming a doctor. But it was right. So I did 2 masters in the end because I couldn't get enough of school. And
you still wanted to know, you enjoyed it, but
yes,
the call to entrepreneurship was stronger in the long run.
Yes. Yeah. And so I decided before I started my own company, though, I wanted to learn what it meant to launch products. So I ended up becoming a product manager for about 4 years. And then I saw a press release in the summer of 2017 for a company that actually unfortunately no longer exists, but they had they'd created a laser scanner that claimed to have brought the cost of scanning down on a per square foot basis by 2 orders of magnitude. All right, so the big thing that was holding up my idea in 2011 was laser scanning was incredibly expensive. We needed to laser scan in order to get an accurate sense of what was actually there. And we needed to do that repeatedly over the course of construction to constantly reconcile the as-built with the plans. And doing it repeatedly was enormously expensive. But if we could bring down the cost of scanning by 100x, then this was doable. So I saw that press release. The light bulb was like, oh, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. But it's funny, I was actually torn at the time. I knew I wanted to start my own company. I was still torn between, do I want to do this thing in construction or do I want to do something in neuroscience? Mm. And I had actually, for about 2 months, I was creating investor decks for 2 different ideas, one in construction and one in neuroscience. And the one in construction just took on a life of its own. I started talking to people about it. People who mattered started getting interested. And
there was just already the interest. So the fact that you created the pitch deck and you were having conversations about both, there was just so much more conversation around the construction technology. It just went from there. I want to dive in a little bit more about then how this technology of the scanning kind of then set you off on this path. But taking a step back for a moment, was it a clear cut in your mind of, okay, I enjoy entrepreneurship. I want to be in this space. So I'm going to become a product manager so I can see how to launch, and then I'm going to develop a product deck, and then I'm going to pitch it. Was it a clear cut for you?
Yes and no, right? So I come from a family of professionals, not from a family of entrepreneurs. So I was actually listening to a podcast recently with somebody, I forget who it was now, but it resonated with me because this person, actually there's a YouTube series out there called Veritasium. I don't know if people are familiar, but this guy, also from a family of professionals, wanted to become a filmmaker and kept pushing off pursuing his dream because there were certain expectations. You go to school for a certain amount of time, you do the right thing, you get the right career. I was dating my wife in grad school. So first of all, I should say, before I even went to grad school, I had a professor, my physics advisor, tell me, he's like, don't go to grad school. I know you want to start a company, so just do that. You don't need to go get a PhD to do that. And I had the advisor in grad school tell me to get out of grad school.
So everyone around you is telling you to get out, but you're like, no.
Well, because the family matters a lot more, and the family expectations were get a degree, get a good job. That's the way that life works. And I was dating my wife at the time, and I told her, I actually remember exactly where we were. We were a block away from Macy's in Herald Square in Midtown Manhattan, and we're on a date, and I just turned around to her. We started getting serious, and I was like, I don't think I ever want to have a job per se. I just want to start companies, work for myself. And she gave me this look like I was an insane person. Like that's the craziest thing, she'd ever heard. So it turns out in some ways you do marry your mother, because that was my mom's reaction too.
So both of them, they're all like, what are you doing when you're exploring this?
Yeah. So, I kept on pushing it off. And so in my mind, I was doing two things. By becoming a product manager first, I was charting a course that would let me pursue the path that I wanted to, but also making the people in my life happy at the same time.
It's like bringing them along with you. So, okay, you're happy, but I'm still getting to where I want to go.
Yes.
How did they react? How did they react when you finally got to the pitch deck and you saw this technology? You're like, all right, I want to start a company now.
Well, so what happened was I kept on starting little or almost starting companies along the way.
What were any of the ones?
I'll tell you. So I have a patent on a pair of reversible sunglasses.
Reversible sunglasses. Okay.
Reversible sunglasses. You can wear them two ways. In fact, they still exist. Somebody's running with that idea right now. They're called Peak, PEEQ. So they may launch this summer for all I know. There was an idea to bundle a set of services and benefits for lawyers and investment bankers, similar to the way that Google provides amazing benefits to their teams in order to stem, departures of their workforce and to increase retention. I knew investment banks and law firms were having similar issues. I'm like, why don't we just offer a package of services and benefits similar to what Google does, but offer it to them? And that actually got pretty far down the road. Each time it was just like, get serious, get back to your job. But I didn't like getting serious in that way. I didn't like getting back to my job. And at some point, after getting fired enough times, it just came to a head where, my wife and I sat down and, she was like, I think you just need to do this. As uncomfortable as it makes me, I see that this is what you need to do. And so just go. And so I did. I grabbed the opportunity and I ran.
So you have the pitch deck. You saw the technology. You create two pitch decks, one around neuro-link type of mentality, and then one around construction tech. And they're just started creating conversations. Now, when you were did you just start pitching this to VCs and say, hey, I have a great idea, and they started buying in on it?
No,
Okay.
no. So there were the first two sales that I needed to make. The first the hardest two sales were my spouse. Was the first one, and the second one was my technical co-founder, Tira Odner. Right, so I can write a little Python. I was doing a lot of MATLAB in grad school, so I could use code for analysis and stuff like that. But actually building web apps was not my thing. I didn't have that skill set, so I needed somebody who did. And so I had to sell my co-founder Tira on this idea as well. So that was the first step. That took.
How did you find your co-founder?
So Tira and I both worked at Pivotal Labs before we started. And she had left the company a few months before I did to start her own thing. And I reached out and I was like, would you help me with mine? Help me build a prototype. I'll pay you a little bit on the side to get it off the ground. And slowly wooed her to be the full-time co-founder. And, I think it helped that where we started actually seeing interest wasn't necessarily from VC right away, but was from owners and developers.
So did you show it to them and they're like, yeah, I would take this, build it, and I'll buy it?
Yeah. So the first big opportunity we had like that, the way this thing really got rolling was I went to a real estate networking event, and the speaker was the president of a major development group in New York that actually just finished a massive skyscraper in New York City. I'm not going to name names because the story doesn't necessarily have the happiest of ending. But it started, we had a really good beginning. So I talked to this person, I actually do the elevator pitch, corner him in the elevator on the way down, right after he's leaving, give him my spiel. I'm like, this is what I have. And he's like, great, here's my card, schedule an appointment with, or, email my assistant. She'll set something up with our heads of construction. And true to his word, she did. And so I think it was 2.5, I had 2.5 weeks to put something together to show them. And I actually used 2 weeks of paternity leave because I had just had my first child. My wife wasn't super thrilled about that. But I used 2 of my 6 weeks of paternity leave to prep for this meeting. I go in, I make the pitch. I showed them the concept, and they're like, okay, when can you actually have this? I was like, 6 months, so which was crazy.
Pulling out of that. Yeah.
Because I don't think we've actually reached that concept, and it's now 4 years later. But 6 months, just give us 6 months. We'll get it done. So, January, February time. And they're like, great, let's schedule a pilot for January. And I was like, great. So then I tell Tira, I've got this massive customer. It's this huge project, Midtown Manhattan. And that's what got things going. In the end, they really did not want to deal with a startup. So when I came back to them in January, they're like, no, you guys, you're not ready. Things are messy.
They wanted something complete, ready, stable, that wouldn't break. And that's why it didn't.
I'm so thankful that whether they lied or just unintentionally, they were optimistic at the outset and couldn't hold up, didn't know how to work with startups. I'm happy it worked out the way that it did. Or at least that they gave me that initial green light, because that gave me the confidence to just. Even though
it was an empty promise, it was the confidence you needed to build it and move forward.
Yes, exactly.
So what did you do next then?
So that helped me convince Tira that this was going to be a thing. It helped me convince my wife as well.
This is 2017, right?
2017. I started meeting with investors at that point. Was having a really tough time. Didn't know exactly. I was still figuring out what the business was like. And it's at this point the business is involved. We were going to have drones. and we were just going to ensure that the building was to spec. Right, that was the whole idea. And pretty soon drones came out of the picture because I couldn't fly them in New York. That was, Donald Trump was president, and so there was a no-fly zone within a mile or half a mile of his residence on Fifth Avenue. So it just wasn't possible. And I realized drones, first of all, had been done at that point, right? There were a bunch of big drone companies, and that wasn't where we were really adding value. Where I saw us adding value was in taking data from a drone or potentially any other source and structuring it and analyzing it. And so we started refocusing, and then I borrowed some money from my dad and from my grandmother, and we bought a laser scanner, the cheapest one we could find, from that company that I found online, and I had enough money to pay Tira essentially, subsistence wages, or barely that. And thank God, my wife is an attorney, so I wasn't starving. That huge help. And she started building up like a prototype of what this thing would look like. I was designing it. She was building it, and we were showing it to people, both customers and investors. That was my thing all the time. That's what I was doing. And we got our first, pilot customer to bite. And I think we started our first pilot of that probably in February, March, actually. So when we were supposed to have started that much bigger project, we started on a smaller kind of condo development.
Only 2-3 months later.
Yeah, in Brooklyn. And we also, around that time, again, I was trying to raise money from September until February. In the journey that I've gone on so far, it's a minuscule amount of time. It felt like forever because I saw the small pile of money that I had gotten from my family was dwindling quickly. So we got into an accelerator called UrbanX, and we managed to get an angel investor to invest in us. And so we raised, I think it was about $350,000 in February of 2018. And that felt like, oh my God, I've got all the money in the world now. This is incredible because we got to hire somebody now. So we did. It was enabled our first hire, and we hired 2 more people within the next couple of months. And the idea was, okay, we're going to go through this 6-month accelerator program. And then in the summer, we're going to raise our seed round, $2 million. That didn't happen exactly as I would have liked either.
I love the realities that come in when you're like, you have a plan, but it doesn't always work out. So you have this first a little bit of seed by an angel investor, right? Rather, yeah. And you hire some people. We're going to make it happen. What did you do next?
So we just started working, right? So I was actually doing a lot of the actual scanning. I was doing the selling, I was doing the fundraising, I was doing the product management, and I was the one going on site doing the scanning. We had also, it's so funny, I forget that he was even there for a while, but for a few months we had on another co-founder who we ended up not working out with, but we needed a third person who had the expertise to actually do what we knew was going to be important, the computer vision, machine learning part of this, right? So I can do the product and the business side, even the design side to a certain extent. Tira can do the software engineering component. And we had brought on a guy who had finished a PhD in civil engineering, whose PhD was on this, right, on this topic of differentiating building information models from laser scans, and perfect.
Do you think it'd work out great?
Yeah. It didn't. It turns out, when you're getting your PhD in civil engineering as opposed to computer science, right, you learn just enough just like I knew MATLAB, right? Just enough to finish the work in my neuroscience course, right? He knew enough Python to finish
something.
his thesis, but not enough to actually build a product. So we hired somebody who we thought did. That person ended up getting overwhelmed by probably April, May, and that was our first crisis because he quit. Right, we hired him in like February when we got the money in, and then he quit in May. And we're like, we're trying to raise money. This is like, if we don't even have the person on our team who could conceivably do this, how could we credibly raise money from anybody? And thankfully, we plugged that hole amazingly well a month or two later. So Cody, who's now on our team, is incredibly talented and has kind of headed up all of the computer vision and computational geometry work that's gone into, that is the backbone of our company.
How did you find Cody? You just kept searching and...
Oh my God, did I search. And I found him in my figurative backyard, so to speak, because I reached out to a professor I knew at Penn. I never took any one of his courses, but I knew he taught computer vision. I'm like, maybe he knows somebody. And he remembered me somehow, which is incredible because he had no reason to. I maybe, talked to him once in the hallway or something like that. And if he didn't remember me, he completely faked it very well. And he's like, I actually have a student, best student I've ever had, who, the company he was working for, a startup doing something similar in a different space, but technically similar, is shutting down. And he's actually moving with his husband to New York, and he's looking for a job. And I was like, put me in touch, and convinced him that was another sale that I made. And
sales in many ways, both
yes.
to customers as well as employees and investors.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of what my job actually consists of, primarily, it's convincing people to do things, right? Whether it's convincing people to pay us money for a product, convincing people to invest money in our growth and in our story, or convincing people to join that, to become part of that story.
Is that just a natural talent, selling? It just comes to you?
I never thought of it that way. I will say persistence, I think, is somewhat natural, is somewhat earned. There were a lot of things. I was actually, the way I thought of myself for a long time was as the guy who couldn't finish things, right? I would start things and not see them through because I get bored, honestly, by a lot of things. I'm the typical ADD kid. I'm fascinated by something and I'll dive incredibly deep into it, and then I'm not interested by it anymore and I'm on to the next thing. So I think that was the way I was perceived by the people I knew and loved and trusted. And at some point I needed to prove to myself, because I knew this was a dream that I wanted. I knew it took a certain amount of persistence. And I was like, okay, then I guess that just means I'm going to have to be a persistent person. So I was, and I will say, I think my wife and I, around the time, I don't know when this movie came out, but it was the McDonald's movie. It was the Founder, about Ray Kroc. And the lesson of that movie for my wife and I, the takeaway was, you have to just stick around long enough to be successful, right? This guy had tried again and again and again and again. And so much of success really is luck, honestly. But you have to be persistent enough to win the lotto, right? You've got to keep on buying a ticket.
So it's just keep persisting until the right place, right time. It just happens. So for Avvir, you just settled on, okay, this is what I'm going to be persistent about.
Yeah, exactly.
For you on this journey, you kind of start stating this picture. You finally start to have the right crew, clicking in place, everything you need. And then that first few clients, you got the first client in the pilot, I think you said February, March. And then were you able to start picking up more from there?
Not really. I learned a bunch of stuff from that pilot. The pilot didn't go particularly well. I mean, everything was being done manually. We didn't have any kind of automation. So it was all Wizard of Oz. Turnaround times were therefore very slow. But they gave us a lot of insight. First of all, they're like, the product needs to go in a different direction, right? I'm not as interested in the, what I'd call the deviation analysis that we do, right? Which is, hey, the laser scan says the pillar is here, and the BIM says the pillar is supposed to be here, and you can tell me that that's the case. I'm not so interested in that. I'm interested in knowing my progress, right? Tell me how far along I am. I'm like, we could do that, right? If we're building an algorithm that tells you whether things are in place or not, the first thing that algorithm would have to do is tell you whether they're there or not. And that would enable us to we just have to display that information. Okay, so we took that feedback. The other really interesting insight that we gained is we had been hired by the general contractor. We actually found a significant deviation in this building. And at first I was like, amazing. Like, I didn't expect that necessarily. I was kind of hoping for it because what an amazing case study. But that wasn't the contractor's reaction. They asked us to stop scanning.
Because that was their own issue, right?
Well, it was their subcontractor's issue. And I thought, well, great, don't you want to hold your subcontractor to account? And the answer, and this was a really interesting dynamic, was no, we have really good relationships with our subcontractors. This is a one-off deal with an owner who I don't know that I'm going to get business with again. It's more important for me to preserve my relationship with a subcontractor who I know, respect, and trust than it is to be completely transparent with the owner, because this is an addressable mistake. The building's not going to fall down because of this, right? It's just an issue we'll correct in the field, kind of, but I'm happy I know about it, but I don't want a record of it, was the main thing.
Wow. So this is almost a new insight for you to not politics, but just the interconnectedness, communications of construction.
Yeah, it's the dynamics of construction. I've started doing a lot about thinking about the economics, the microeconomics of construction, and really how game theory applies to construction. Because game theory is all about how do you get different parties to come together and align or not. And that, honestly, if you boil it down, is probably, I'd say, one of the fundamental issues in construction, more than any technology per se is going to solve, right? So there's some robotics out there that are going to solve probably one of the other major problems, which is a lack of skilled labor. But this game theory problem, this lack of alignment, which by the way is super similar to medicine in a lot of ways, right? Where you've got a conflict of interest between the provider, the payer, and the user. You've got that in construction all the time. You've got a developer, you've got a builder, and very often you've got the tenant who knows none of this before he moves in, but often is, needs to actually manage the building or the part of the building that he occupies. So there's very little alignment of incentives. There's very little transparency because of that. And one of our, I guess, part of our mission is to shed light on the industry, bring transparency to the job, because I think ultimately it will benefit everybody, right? If you can manage to align incentives and bring transparency to a job, everybody wins. I think the best example of that is in construction payments. So construction payments are notoriously problem plagued. It takes, I think it's the second longest payment cycle in any industry, right? So on average, it takes about 59 days from time of invoice to time of payment. But it's really not uncommon for a subcontractor to get paid 90 days, 120 days, a year after work has been completed. And that drives a lot of subcontractors out of business, right? If you don't have sufficient scale, you don't have cash flow, right? You go bankrupt. And then, by the way, that has ripple effects through the whole project. If your concrete subcontractor goes out of business while the building is going up, your project is going to suffer, right? Finding a new subcontractor to come in and do that work, project's delayed at least 3-4 months. The problem is, right, why are the subcontractors paid so late? It's this cycle of mistrust, right? So the owner, the payer, whomever it is concerned that the subcontractor is fibbing. Guess what they are? They are fibbing about how much work they've done because they're worried you're going to pay late. And so that cycle just perpetuates itself. If there was a single source of truth that could be trusted by all parties about how much has been built and how much is owed to whom, by whom, and when, that, in theory at least, should eliminate the friction from all of that. So that's what we're after.
You paint a picture of course, you have human just behavior and tendencies. Are you feeling like you're fighting against it, or do you see that the whole industry is wanting this? Because in some ways they've been doing it this way for a long time, so it's just the way it is. Are you trying to change the entire industry?
Yeah, in some sense, but construction is not a monolith. So the way that we talk about ourselves, one of the companies I was involved with as a consultant. Actually, the first job I really had was helping a consultancy start an education technology company. And I realized through that experience that technology is not always the right tool to solve problems. We were trying to solve a problem about parent, teacher, child communication, right? There was this triangle of communication that needed to occur, and it often didn't. If you have kids in grade school, you probably know when you ask your kids, how is school? You get, eh. So they were trying to solve that problem with an app. And I realized pretty early on in that experience, this might not be the problem that's easily solved with technology. You need something, you need psychology potentially, or sociology applied here. And so the same is true, I think, in construction. I don't think any technology, in and of itself is going to solve the problems that exist in construction. It's not going to solve the nature of the industry, the way things have always been done. What technology can do is enable the agents of change who are already on the ground, right, who want to make change within the industry. It can enable them to do so. It can give them the tools. And so that's how we try and position ourselves, not as, hey, adopt Avvir and everything is going to be magically better, because it doesn't work that way. But if you want to do things in a better way, this is the tool you need. It's kind of like if you have a to-do list, right? You don't automatically get organized. But if you want to get organized, you should get a list.
You describe this agent of change. It's almost like what you're trying to do then is find those agents of change that want to make it happen, and then your technology can help them make it possible.
That is exactly what we were trying to do. Exactly.
So fast forward, you get kind of giving us the journey from the first year, really, yes, from the beginning and up into that first year. Help me understand, and just quickly, the last 3 years of the progress and the focus. Have you been able to find those agents of change that want your help?
We have, and we haven't, right? So we've definitely struck out with some. It hasn't. We haven't found the magic bullet to understand, and discriminate among the potential customers who are, can we create a profile and know exactly in advance who's going to be a good adopter and who won't be, who's interested in change and who won't, until we have those conversations. So we've had a lot of conversations, and we found some really amazing people who really want to make change, some really amazing companies who want to make change at a corporate level. And so we're starting to see the fruits of that. For the investors who get construction, I would always say this to investors when they would ask, what kind of, what are you looking for in a VC, besides the money, which is usually most of it. But besides the money, what are you looking for? In the last round that we raised, the answer that I gave consistently was somebody who gets that construction is not your typical enterprise industry, right? That this is going to be a little bit of a bumpier growth story. than just your typical B2B SaaS company that takes off like a rocket ship. We are trying to change an industry, and we do need to identify those people, and things just take a long time because in comparison to producing a Word document, for example, producing a building moves at a glacial pace. And that's the kind of scales we're working on. We have to find a new project. That project maybe is only being contracted now, and it's not actually getting put into the ground for another year. So those are the timescales we have to deal with. But we're making headway. So it's been pretty amazing.
What are you most excited about looking ahead now, of kind of where you're headed in the journey and the progress?
I'm excited about the initial vision, right? I'm excited about, or at least the vision that we've come to, that we've settled on, about really changing the industry, providing that true system of record, and what that can unlock, right? I've started talking about, a potential app store that might sit on top of, the eventual system of record of construction. In my mind, I refer to it as the as-built app store. But one of the potential, because we're not going to do everything, right? What you can do with accurate information is pretty unlimited, and we're not going to do all of it. So we're going to want people to take advantage of the data that we're providing and do something with it. And one of the use cases I'm really excited about is that, there are a couple of companies out there, for example, who can take a building information model, right? That's usually a design tool, and tell the architect that's putting it together whether it is to code or not. Really helpful thing, right? They've digitized the local municipal codes. And so they can tell you whether the doorway needs to be wider because, a wheelchair needs to get through, all of the little things that you might mess up on and get trip up on at the inspector's office. Now you can know in advance. But it's only useful as during the design phase of the project. But imagine if the BIM was always a reflection of what was actually being built, and you could run that check during the construction process. Well, now all of a sudden, I'm not going to get tripped up when the inspector shows up and says, "Oh, you need to stop work because you don't have enough ceiling height here. This got too low. Somebody narrowed the doorway by accident. You've got to undo this. Take off the sheetrock." Right? That's the bane of a contractor or developer's existence. And we can eliminate that. We could potentially obviate the need for a lot of those inspections in the first place if a municipality can trust that system being run. Then I don't mean to put all the inspectors out of a job, but at least we can make their jobs a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. You give them already a checklist of where it is, and they can affirm it, and they don't have to do as much. Now this BIM, the building information modeling system. So basically, you're trying to make sure everything that's contained in there is accurate, up to date, and you're just excited about the potential of even the additional applications that can ride on that if it's an accurate information that's always up to date.
Exactly.
Wow. Curious, Avvir, where did the name come from?
So Avvir means air in Hebrew. And if you remember, I initially thought we were going to be a drone company. So I was like, what's a cool sounding name? And I hit on Avvir, and I had to find a spelling that would work. And the spelling is nonsensical in English, but I would say like 90% of people do get the pronunciation right, despite that. And
works out.
We changed the logo because the logo actually used to look like a little drone. We changed the logo, but when we were doing that, we're like, should we change the name? I still like it. It sounds cool. So we kept it, and that's it.
I love usually the history of names that usually came from something else, but it is what it is. It becomes what the company becomes.
Exactly.
I really am fascinated with the journey that you've been on, and you're still on. It's a big mission. Like, if anything, you're taking on a shift in many ways of the entire construction culture or mindset of keeping accurate data, and everyone knows what it is all at the same time, and you're held accountable to it. This is, as you said, large scale productions don't happen in a day. You're probably helping companies that are building building things already next year or 5 years from now. What do you see as though you're in kind of the future of building construction tech? If you kind of look ahead.
Well, I hope we're part of it. I'll say that first. It's not guaranteed, but certainly I hope we're a part of that. There are a lot of things happening within construction, a lot of forces at play right now. I mentioned the labor shortage. That's certainly going to continue to be a factor. So I do see more robotics and more automation coming into play. One of the things that's happening right now, actually in part because of COVID, a lot of people took COVID as an opportunity to just retire. Like, hey, the whole Zoom thing is not working for me if I'm, north of 55. I've done my time in this job. And so a lot of the old guard left. And it's what I've been hearing from construction companies since I got into this industry is, hey, it's hard to attract young people into the industry. I think either technology is going to help attract young people into the industry, or technology is going to make it so that you need fewer people. But one way or the other, that problem is going to be solved probably via technology. And so I just see a lot of that coming. I want to see more efficiency. I think the whole industry wants to see more efficiency. But what I'm optimistic about is that the fundamental underlying problems really get solved, whether through technology or not, around that alignment problem, right? How do you solve for the mistrust that exists? I mean, the quotes that I've gotten from people are, litigation starts the moment the shovel hits the ground. And that's not true everywhere in the United States, but we are a pretty litigious society. The less that is the case, the more productive construction will be as an industry, and probably the more pleasant it will be for all parties. And I think transparency and feedback are going to be a part of that. The one other thing I should say, in terms of where I think technology is going, we talk about Avvir in particular, but I think this is true for our competitors and a lot of other companies in the space broadly. Right now, I would describe our algorithm, right, our core technology, as a descriptive engine, right? So we take in data that is unstructured from the field, photographs, laser scans, and we can inform somebody about what is there, what is contained, what is the information that is contained in those reality capture data. Where I think we ultimately move to is we first move to becoming a predictive engine, right? So what does this likely mean for the future of your project, right? So if you're behind schedule by this much, when are you likely to finish? If something has deviated from where it was supposed to be, what is the likely impact on construction? And then to move from predictive to prescriptive, right? So not just what is the impact on your building going to be, but what should you do about it? And so that's what gets me really excited. When I have the free time, I spend my time reading up on new innovative ideas in machine learning and AI. And I'm still fascinated by neuroscience. And so keep up with the trends and topics there. And so I'm bringing those back to like our machine learning and computer vision team. Like, do you think we could apply this to the algorithm? I think this would be amazing. Usually the answer is maybe. I don't know. We'll look into it. But that's what gets me pumped.
Your fascination and interest with continual innovation and the technology that is coming down the road, coupling that with your persistence to just make something happen. I'm excited to see where you go next. For those that are listening and want to learn more, you can go to avvir.com. That's AVVIR.io. Excuse me.
Yes,
Avvir.io. Yeah, it's a good tech company. Always uses IO.
If the person who owns the .com is listening to this, though, please reach out. We'd love to own it. We just can't get in touch with you.
There we go. Just be able to sell. I love it. Thanks so much for your time, Raffi. This is an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
We'll see you all on the next episode of UpTech Report. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.